Hello everybody. So this is my video this week for critical criminology. This is right after you guys got done doing posts on the discussion board about drugs. So I think I would like to focus mostly on the Linneman reading and your guys' reactions to the Linneman reading. And then after I've done that, I'll give you a brief introduction to the next set of readings you'll be discussing. Now, these set of readings are not due at the end of this week, but at the end of next week. So next Wednesday you will have had to have post. You can post this week or you can post next week, but with normally taking the last half of the week off for Holy Week, I decided to keep that break in here, especially because we don't have presentations coming up at the end of the semester. So, okay. So first of all, you guys did a good job, just like you did the week before. I noticed a slight decrease in the number of people posting, so I'm hoping that will go up next week. So a couple of things. First of all, in the Linneman reading, one thing is he's not necessarily interested in whether the faces of meth works. He doesn't collect any data on that. So any attempt we have at trying to assess the usefulness of faces of meth is it's kind of just speculation, because it's not what the article is concerned about. He's not really interested in if it's good or bad, but what does the images display about social structure? So it's not necessarily, if you will, an attack of faces of meth. It's more of a illustration of how faces of meth reflect certain things that are happening within our culture, particularly having to do with race. And so the question is like, why meth? Why is it that we see this for meth and not for other drugs? Some of you guys picked up on this and talks about, well, we should in essence be doing this for various drugs. But more the question is why are we doing it specifically for meth? And that gets us into the theme that some of you picked up on, which is the idea of marginal whiteness. So the reason why we have something like faces of meth showing these sort of deteriorated, monstrous faces of particularly white people is that there's a fear, right, as a result of the racial structure of our society. There's a fear of losing the power that goes along, the privileges that go along with being white. And so this often creates a certain hostility within white discourse about these populations that are white but don't reflect sort of normal middle-class white values or middle-class white culture. This is a lot of the stereotyping you get around people like sort of redneck white trash discussions to begin with. They're often portrayed in a particularly hostile manner as a way of differentiating them from whiteness. They are not white enough. So in essence, what Linneman's trying to say is just that the way we portray meth is a response to who we perceive as meth users. So we perceive meth as a particularly white drug, which creates this other response. It's very different from other drugs. If we tie this to Linneman's work in general, it has a profound impact on the lives of those people. So the lives of people who are marginally white and how they're treated, as well as the lives of meth users and how they'll be treated within the justice system. That's because it's not just that it's illegal, it's not just that it's bad for you, which obviously using meth is, but it's that we've dehumanized them in a particular way. We've rendered them into a monster. Linneman wrote a really interesting article as well on, I'm not sure if you guys remember this, I believe it was in Florida about 7 or 8 years ago. There was somebody who was possibly high on something, we don't really know, but according to police reports, he was eating the face of someone. and they shot him an exuberant amount of time, like in hyperbolic amount of times. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but they shot this individual a lot. We know nothing else about this case other than the fact that he was eating the face of a man, at least according to reports. And so what's interesting about this case is that often in cases where police shoot an unarmed suspect, what you get is you get this sort of like really strong negative response to that. We see this throughout mass media stuff all the time. And what Lindemann wants to say is, why is it that no one reacted to this in any way, shape, or form, other than that, like, basically when it hit the news, the only thing they were saying is like, oh, a real zombie attack, and it became this kind of joke. And in particular, Lindemann is interested in this rendering him into a monster, into a zombie, and what that does for how the police are allowed to treat him. That by becoming this monster, right, all of a sudden it doesn't matter how we react to it, which is the entire purpose of the zombie narrative. You think about, like, when you watch zombie films, like, essentially it's a way of interacting with sort of egregious violence against human beings without feeling that anything is wrong with it, right? Because the human beings have literally, in the case of the fiction, been rendered into a monster. And we see the zombie used in a variety of ways, linking in with police brutality, is Lindemann's point. There's even things like police trainings that are supposed to be like emergency trainings that are themed upon a zombie apocalypse. But if you think about like having police go out and shoot somebody, and in fact the people involved in this case in Florida had even taken that training, which is sort of ironic. And so you think about, like, what is it to like essentially go out and shoot human targets in a specific way that have been dehumanized, and then go back out into the field with the exact same firearm? What's the impact that has on people? Once again, Lindemann, like a lot of the stuff we looked at, is not being hostile specifically about police, but it's about how are these cultural narratives sort of seeping into the way we do police practices, whether or not we're talking about media images like the faces of meth, or whether we're talking about doing police trainings along specific imagery that involves the dehumanization of a population. So what we see is the meth users being turned into something monstrous, and ergo, the way in which we treat meth users are unimportant. And not just, and so beyond meth users, this is true of marginal whites. Whenever police, or even us in everyday life, interact with marginal white populations, we'll have a tendency to leap to thinking about them as meth addicts. So particularly if they have missing teeth, or abrasions on their face, or etc., which could be caused by all sorts of things, we will leap to them being a meth user. We will treat them as a meth user. And also because of where this falls on racial hierarchy, right? And the fact that the way in which we think about meth users and think about white trash populations being tied to this fear of this loss of power, it simultaneously dehumanizes any non-white population on a symbolic level, as well as these specific marginalized white populations. So in other words, it reinforces these sort of racial dynamics that have existed since colonialism. Okay, so that's kind of just some overarching comments, trying to add a little more flavor in on top of the good work you guys already did on the discussion board. Okay, so for next week or the week after, we're going to be looking at a variety of articles that links up with a different way of thinking about crime that happens in critical criminology. Critical criminology, and we've already kind of interacted with this a little, are wondering whether our definition of crime is our sort of go-to definition of crime is sufficient for criminology, whether we need to expand the definition of crime. In particular, we usually think about crime as, and most criminology continues to think about crime as something that is illegal, right? So what makes something criminal is essentially that the court system or the government has decided that it is against the law, which seems like a very common sense, easy to understand. It's not surprising that people went there. But it doesn't capture certain things. And in particular, criminologists are increasingly wanting to ask the question of, well, how does that definition of crime deal with a concept of justice? So what is justice? And is justice and legality the same thing? The problem with thinking about justice in terms of thinking simply of something as legal or illegal is that often a lot of the actions which negatively impact people's lives, that hurts a larger number of people, and is often done in a very malicious manner, isn't covered by the law. And in fact, the law has been utilized to, in essence, make those things possible. We can think back to when we were doing the stuff on white-collar crime, right? And talking about large multinational corporations making sure that whatever ways they abuse people are legal, in whatever ways smaller businesses abuse people are not. If you're capable of shaping the law to your interests, you're capable of harming people without it being illegal. Same thing with when we were talking about genocide, right? We were looking at genocide stuff earlier. And genocides are de facto legal because the government is killing off a population. Is that something, it's obviously not just to commit a genocide. It's obviously not just to wholesale, basically poison a population or something like that. In terms of, companies dumping and so things of that nature, yet they're legal. So if we want criminology to be more about understanding how people come to do unjust acts or how people can harm other people, right? Then we have to broaden our definition of crime. And in particular, there is a movement to think about crime as harm. Harming other people is crime. Now, that means that some of the things we do that are legal are harm and would therefore be crime. And some of the things that we normally think of, some of the things that are illegal are not crime. Would not be crime, would not be a form of harm. So it alters our definition. Obviously some things that are illegal would fall under criminology still, right? Like things like, murdering people or something like that is an obvious form of harm. But it's also not as big of a harm to one individual murdering another individual as it is, a small group of people murdering, hundreds of thousands of people or even millions of people. So really, I guess, if we wanted to rephrase it, the people who want to reframe crime as harm really want to ask the question, why is it that, as a discipline, criminology is more concerned with a shoplifter, right, than they are people who commit acts of genocide, right? Why is it that's the case? Okay, how do our two articles fit in with this literature? One, we have an example of the harm literature. This is the article on Native Americans and environmental harm. So you look through that, it'll give you a good view of what is it that a criminologist who specifically focuses on harm is interested in looking at. The other article is an article on restorative justice. And really, with that article, I want you guys to start thinking about, what does a justice system based on harm rather than legality look like? How is that going to alter how we do justice work? What is it that cops and communities should be doing if we understand justice as harm as opposed to just doing something that the state has said is illegal? Okay. So that is, I guess, my call. We will not have another video next week because you will not necessarily have had this done. And then then the week after I will post a new video, and we'll do another set after this literature on harm. So have a great Holy Week, and I will talk to you soon. As always, contact me if you have any questions. Stay safe. Bye.